From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's the top of the week, which means it is time for our strange news segment. There's shady stuff going on in the world of fast food. There are mysteries in the hiking trails of the West Coast. And if you are one of the many, many people who started making your own business online during the pandemic, a specific type of business, then you may be running into trouble sooner rather than later.
It's true. And yeah, we can certainly lead with that one. You might have heard of a site called OnlyFans. And I think if you've heard of it, you probably have associations that you make with that site. The idea is that it is a paywalled, creator-driven platform where folks who create stuff can reach their fans directly. Kind of like Patreon, except the content, it's all bonus. It's like in the way that Patreon, you'd have a product like a podcast or some sort of startup or whatever, some sort of project that exists out in the world. And then Patreon pays you, for this product that you do that isn't hosted on Patreon necessarily, but then usually there are tiers of extras that you can get to, certain levels of contribution as fans. Well, OnlyFans is specifically paywalled content made by individuals and sold directly to users. And that association that I'm talking about is pretty much porn. OnlyFans, theoretically could have all kinds of content creators on it. And there apparently is a small community of content creators that are chefs and yoga instructors and, things like that. But by and large, they have made their money, and it's quite a lot of money, in fact, billions of dollars, off of the backs of sex workers. And these include folks that are maybe already known in the world of adult content, like porn stars that, do more, let's say, candid videos that are then sold directly to individual users who can subscribe to that person, that creator, that performer. And there are ways of, doing private chats and, situations that lead you to be able to tip and all of that good stuff. So on the positive side, and what a big argument for the positive impact of OnlyFans is that it allows sex workers or individuals that are comfortable with this kind of work to make money directly from people that want to pay them money. And obviously there's no actual sex involved. It's just, videos and chats and things like that. And, you could argue this is very empowering for individuals, especially in a world where sex workers are often highly stigmatized. I was watching a video on the YouTube channel I always shout out here, Internet Today, and they pointed to a scene in the movie Boogie Nights, and I completely agree with this as a really good example, where Don Cheadle's character has decided to get out of the porn industry. He's made a good bit of money, and he's decided to get out, and he wants to open a stereo shop. So he goes to a bank. He asks for a loan, and the banker, basically, when he finds out what he's done to earn his money, says, no, we don't associate with your type of people from your industry.
No matter what degree it does or does not affect the situation at hand. Like the numerous stories of people who are nurses, people who are teachers, people who are working in office jobs who get blacklisted or get effectively canceled in their field of employment simply because of an OnlyFans account. And that's just an acceleration or a new iteration of the old story of like somebody finding nude photographs from years ago. I think we should be very clear at this point, like sex work is work. And regardless of somebody's, personal morality about it, it's very unhelpful, I think, to stigmatize people. I mean, don't people always make a big deal of platitudes like, hey, You are not your job. Don't let your job define you. I don't think that should be any different.
Right. And unless it offends me on some sort of like spiritual level.
Unless it helps me feel better about myself without doing better as a person.
That's absolutely right.
Yes, you're bad and you should feel bad.
You're bad and you should feel bad. But, you know, the OnlyFans also, like, you can't even see the content really unless you're a subscriber. So it also is probably a positive thing for, you know, limiting the exposure. You could screenshot it, I guess, but it feels like it's a community where people are more or less respectful of the folks they follow and don't go passing it around. So in theory, if you had an account, you know, you might still be able to have a life as a regular person and not have that follow you into the workplace. And, you know, understandably during COVID, they saw their profits rise significantly. I believe they made $2 billion last year. It is assumed that we will see that pretty much double. But in a pretty shocking turn of events, the leadership at OnlyFans have decided to essentially ban the very content that they are known for and the very content that has made them all of this money. Over these years, especially during COVID when folks like literally were out of work and they needed some folks decided to turn to this as a revenue stream. And, you know, there are a handful of creators on OnlyFans that pull in like up to $1 million a year. Obviously, that's at the very, very top end of things. But, you know, you have folks making $50,000 a year, like the kind of money that would amount to like a good salary. So understandably, the folks that are, you know, relying on the ability to get paid for this content are kind of freaking out. And it does feel like a form of cancellation or further stigmatization of sex workers by a company that absolutely profited off of their backs, their literal backs.
But it's not really OnlyFans though, or at least their reasoning, right? If you see the statement.
That's right. The statement is they kind of bury the lead. We'll get to what the real lead is, but they essentially are saying I'll just read the statement. We can dissect it together. It says this: in order to ensure the long-term sustainability of our platform and to continue to host an inclusive community of creators and fans, we must evolve our content guidelines. These changes are to comply with the requests of our banking partners and payout providers. Okay, so you could have ended it with content guidelines, but then that's the real kicker there. These changes are to comply with the requests of our banking partners and payout providers. So therein lies the Boogie Nights comparison. Turns out banks and lenders and even payment providers are still kind of squeamish about being associated with this kind of stuff. And then there are reasons for that. You know, understandable reasons. There's a really interesting investigative piece that the BBC did about underage people using OnlyFans to create content and make money. It's called The Children Selling Explicit Videos on OnlyFans, and it was from May 27 of this year. And it's by Noel, man after my own heart, Titheraraj, and Rihanna Croxford, and it is a really, really well researched and investigated piece. They went in and through various means kind of exposed some of the, let's say, limitations of the age verification methods that are in place. And these are some of the most serious cases they found. One of which is schools have shared anonymous reports of pupils using the site, including a 16-year-old who boasted to her careers advisor about the amount of money she made on the site and showed off her, quote, exuberant spending on Instagram. So essentially posted videos underage, bragged about it at school to her guidance counselor, and then posted flex type things on Instagram of like all the, you know, fancy swag she was buying with all this money. Another one is underage creators and users of the site include victims of prior sexual abuse and those with mental health issues and suicidal thoughts, according to Childline Counselor Notes, which is a UK organization. By the way, OnlyFans is a UK-based site. I only just recently found that out. UK police forces say children have complained about their images being uploaded to the site without consent, and one 17-year-old reported being blackmailed. And then you've got missing children are appearing in OnlyFans videos, according to a U.S. watchdog, which also says it has received reports of child sexual exploitation. So those are obviously very, very serious violations of the terms of use of the site and folks being able to kind of bypass these age verification things. The OnlyFans leadership says all of these were targeted and all of these were deleted, and that they have since included a much more robust, let's say, age verification technique, because some folks were using fake IDs, or even like a grandmother's passport was used in one situation. So I'm just trying to show both sides of the issue. So it's understandable.
The old grandma's passport, eh?
The old grandma's passport grift. Yeah, classic grift. I'm just trying to show both sides, because I think obviously there is a positive, for of age consenting adults trying to make money off of this type of sex work. And then, like you have with any sex work scenario, there are going to be abuses of it. I would argue that by and large, these are like the exception to the rule, but I didn't do this investigative piece, but based on what I've read, it does seem like it was maybe around 17 cases, and that they did, up their security precautions. But it's kind of a moot point now, because, they're shutting it down. So I don't know, that's the gist of the story, but I think an even bigger part of the story is how much control companies like PayPal and Amex and, Visa have over literally what we can buy. Mm-hmm. They don't have to, appeal a decision that they make to cut somebody off from being a vendor of theirs. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to make a case to any court. They can just say, we don't like what you're doing. We think it's in poor taste. We as a brand don't want to be associated with you. Therefore, you're now cut off. So, you could argue that if it's the big three here, which I think in online payment, it would be Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. Is that too much power? Is that essentially a monopoly or an oligopoly of some kind? And they wield way more control, because I watched a really great video on a UK YouTube channel called TLDR News, I think is what it's called. It's not associated with any of the big UK broadcasters. It's independent. But they mentioned that the only solution to this is to start accepting cryptocurrency. And as we know, cryptocurrency has its own issues in terms of regulation and regulation to come. So, it would certainly put a wrench in things to a degree, but they would still be able to operate under the same model that's making them billions of dollars, instead of literally kind of pivoting to something that is probably going to cause them to fall flat on their faces, if you ask me. Or there was another thing that, like, I think UK governments were talking about doing in general, which is like a state-sponsored type of peer-to-peer payment service that's like a digital wallet. I forget the acronym. It was like PDPP or something like that. But in that case, and they make the point on this TLDR video, all these acronyms, the power is no longer with these private companies, but it's with the state. So isn't that even worse and scarier?
Yeah. So I think there are two questions you asked. So the first one is, what's the way around those large, somewhat monopolistic payment platforms? Unfortunately, there are other, horses in the race, but they are very distant. They're much smaller. They're not near as ubiquitous. And these platforms, the majority of their value is based on how ubiquitous and easy to use they are, right?
Sure.
So, like, you could look at another country or non-Western country that may have their own payment platform, but with that might come a little bit too much government control or overreach, if you're looking at an authoritarian country that monitors transactions. So I'm sure a lot of people in the UK would be worried about that. But the second, I guess, to answer your second question, at least on my end, I'm not an expert here, governments in general seem to have a really tough time staying up to date with current technology. So much so that one of the most successful security strategies of governments is to purposely use anachronistic technology. So, like, you can't, bust the water treatment system because it's too old to be online. And it uses some like very vague Old Testament Deuteronomy level version of an OS.
Or what they used to do with like nuclear power facilities and things like that. You don't want them to be directly connected to the wider internet. It's more of an intra. Yes, air gap, exactly.
To me, the issue of, can one trust a government not to abuse its monitoring power in that regard? To me, that's secondary to the immediate practical issue, which is, could a government actually do it? Like, could they make something that people would want to use? That would be my question. I don't know.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? I mean, it definitely seems like a a question that's just going to keep having to be asked, moving forward, like in lots of other aspects of our lives. It is a pretty small handful of companies that hold the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah. And I don't know how anyone, even the most powerful military, could pry those keys from their hands, because they can just hire another army to stand in front of whatever building holds the power. But, for me, guys, I'm thinking more on the individual level of this story. There's a CNN business article that you linked to, Noel, and in it, there's a person who goes by Maya on OnlyFans, and she has a really interesting account here discussing how over the past really 4 or 5 years, all of these different companies, places online like Craigslist, I think Pornhub, several of the outlets where an individual who was trying to make a living via this kind of work would be able to post things and then make money, right? The outlets where an individual person could make money are disappearing. And OnlyFans is just the next one of those. And she's saying, the reason why she isn't out doing, quote, full service sex work right now is because she has an outlet like this. But if she doesn't, she will have to revert back to that.
Which is far more dangerous personally. I mean, unless you are really, really cautious and vetting your clients and working in maybe a more high class situation, you hear about it all the time.
I think it's still very dangerous because of the stigmatization. 100%. I mean, law enforcement tends to prosecute sex workers to a much more extreme degree than the Johns. Right. Yeah. The clients.
And that's because of it's almost like a slut shaming kind of mentality that is ingrained in like our culture and the police. Because why do you think it's the same thing where when, a man cheats, let's say, or like a high profile situation like that, the woman oftentimes is the one who gets humiliated in the press.
Sure.
Not the woman who he cheats with, but the woman who he cheats on. Right. And she becomes pilloried as some sort of, she was jilted, by this like powerful man, and like we should mock her and pity her or something.
Well, it's weird. The dichotomy of lionizing a dude for doing the stuff a woman is demonized for. But I would also point out that the stark reality of it is that when there are people, and we have some people in the audience who are sex workers, when there is a prosecution of something like that, first off, it's already ridiculous because in the United States, it's not illegal if you're filming it and selling it. It's just, like, that's what makes it not illegal in some cases. And that's just so bizarre. But also the people, like sex workers who are being prosecuted, are often in tremendously vulnerable positions. So they may not have legal recourse that other people may possess. I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right, Ben.
It's just really tough because there needs to be some kind of online place for this stuff. And at some point, some company has to be bold and just say, this is what we're doing. The problem is it comes with a whole host of other problems that you already outlined, Noel, about controlling who's using it and how they're using it, and what types of nefarious stuff could find its way onto one of those things. But then they have to work directly with whatever banking institution and or banking institutions to make it legal and work.
And to make it airtight enough for those banking institutions' comfort level. But I would argue it might not even be about that, because it's very similar with like marijuana, for example. Like marijuana is legal in many parts of the country now, but a lot of those, companies have a hard time getting bank loans. Or I've been into several dispensaries that are like chains, for example. There's one in California called MedMen, and they make you like take cash out. They make you get cash back and then pay them with the cash back. So it's obviously a point of sale issue where they can't directly process your Visa. So you get charged. It just seems really weird and esoteric, like, you know what I mean? Like really like outdated, but it's literally a product of them not being able to have direct access to Visa, MasterCard, and payment processing. Because for the same reason, because the regulations are still on the fence nationally, they don't want to be associated with it.
Ugh.
So something to keep an eye on. I mean, what happens when a situation like this, goes down? There's a vacuum, and something usually fills that vacuum. So I don't imagine that the folks that are on this platform making their money are like losing their minds entirely. The new regulations don't go into effect until October, and there are already other platforms like this that exist that many of these folks probably are already on in tandem, which probably just means that the audience will migrate to that other platform. It was a thing. You guys remember Tumblr? Tumblr was like a blog site that had an interesting format, and they also were known for being open to pornography or explicit images. And I believe Yahoo bought them and did the very same thing that we're seeing here. They wanted to get more investment. They wanted to try to make it into something more palatable. And so they also banned the thing that literally made the product that they bought what it was. Do you guys think about Tumblr much anymore these days?
Not really. I know my wife liked it a lot when it was around.
Well, there was a lot of kind of cool artsy type stuff, and some of it happened to be a little bit on the erotic side. I wouldn't say it was like hardcore pornography, but it definitely erred on the side, leaned more towards the like kind of titillating type stuff. But something to keep an eye on. It's interesting how much control these institutions have over literally everything we consume. Something we talk about a lot, and we will talk about it more, I have no doubt. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break to hear from a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be back with more strange news.
All right, welcome back. We are going to get pretty serious here for a few minutes. This story is coming out of California, and it is about a very tragic event, an event that is unsolved as we record this on the 23rd of August, 2021. Going to read from the Mercury News. Here's the headline. Missing Northern California family of 3 found dead in remote hiking area identified. This was written on August 19th of this year, so not long ago at all. And I'm just going to read a bit from this. It says it was written by the Associated Press and put into the Mercury News. It says a Northern California family of 3 that had been reported missing was found dead Tuesday along with the family's dog on a hiking trail in a remote area of the Sierra National Forest. People who were looking for the family discovered the family vehicle. It was parked at the Sierra National Forest, and not that far away, they found the bodies of John Garish, Ellen Chung, their 1-year-old daughter, and their dog. They were found near a place called Devil's Gulch, and this is Mariposa County. That was according to the sheriff of that county. Now, here's the thing. When the family was initially discovered, the cause of death was not immediately known, and it wasn't easily discernible. So, people were trying to figure out what the heck happened. There's no, if you're a crime scene investigator, nothing jumps out as in that's obviously why one or more of these people expired. Especially finding the dog and the 1-year-old also dead makes it extremely puzzling that there's no signs. So on the 19th or right around that time, investigators there in Mariposa County are hit with a mystery, like what the heck happened? And of course, speculation begins because we don't have answers. What could possibly kill an entire family while they're hiking? The first thing you may think about is the heat. You've heard this, you've experienced this, no doubt, depending where you live on this planet, everywhere, but particularly in the Western United States, there have been heat waves where it gets up to 100 degrees very easily, sometimes 105. On that day when they were found, when they, perhaps died, it had reached 109 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not good. But investigators found that there was water. They were carrying water with them when they were hiking because they were on a hike as a family. They like to do that. They were prepared. That doesn't seem to be the cause, at least as of right now. And as the reporting continued up until today on the 23rd, all kinds of things, possibilities have been put out there. One that I thought you guys might be interested in, one that piqued my interest at least, was the concept that there was an algae bloom on a nearby river or within a nearby river's system that perhaps could have contributed to their deaths. And I had never heard of that as a thing that could potentially be fatal to, say, an entire family just out of the blue like that.
Is that like a red tide type situation where it can be like toxic or something? Or what's the deal with the algae bloom?
Well, I learned a little bit about it from the BBC, from an article they posted titled "Poison Algae May Have Killed California Family," police say. And it does say that the nearby waterways were being tested for some kind of toxic algae bloom that may have occurred because not that long ago, these same waterways did have a toxic algae bloom. So, I mean, that very well may be the answer to the questions here, and that's it. And mystery is over. Terrible tragedy. That's what happened. But perhaps not. And I don't know much about toxic algae blooms, how they would actually kill a whole family like that. Do you know anything about that, Ben?
Yeah, just the brief part of it, and this is from the California Department of Public Health along with Sierra National Forest. It's weird because algae bloom, I think for some of us might make you think of a flower blossoming, right? It's not super different. This can happen with cyanobacteria and then several kinds of different algae. And what happens is when they bloom, they're growing out of control at an unprecedented pace. And this happens when water is warm, stagnant, or slow moving, and it's full of stuff that maybe is not the best for us to drink a ton of, but is awesome for algae, like nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. And when they grow that quickly, they become too dense, or they can use up the existing oxygen in the water, and that's when they start to release gases. So you could be poisoned by the gas emitted by this algae bloom. It's not like a Swamp Thing moment where something rises from the muck and then physically hits people, because then you would, like, to your point about what the investigator said, you would see things like contusions, bruising, broken bones, broken hyoid bone if they're getting choked. So what this sounds like is more like quite possibly asphyxiation or poisoning in general from the inhalation of those gases. And that happens.
It's like if you mixed ammonia and chlorine or something like that, and you created they would create a chemical reaction that creates chlorine gas that would kill the hell out of you.
Just so, yeah. It reminds me of those exploding lake stories. Remember about that on the African continent? Because when those were dangerous, I think one killed thousands of people. And that wasn't an algae bloom. That was just a concentration of carbon dioxide that created this gas cloud. But this gas cloud caught people unawares, and it took their lives as a result. So it seems like, as strange a culprit as an algae bloom may sound like, it seems plausible, doesn't it? I mean, again, we're not experts on this.
No, we're not. It does seem like it could be that. There are a couple other things that are being put out by places like the Washington Post. You can read about this story everywhere right now. Things like a nearby cave system somehow in one way or another released, gases again, maybe anything from radon to carbon monoxide to just other gases that are escaping a cave system because of some small collapse or some release of gas that generally wouldn't happen on a regular basis, that would cause the immediate area or maybe a depressed area from an elevation standpoint of where they were in to cause it to fill up with gas and push a lot of the oxygen out. If it's a heavier gas, that's a possibility. That's really all I've seen as how it could have happened because of the state in which everyone was found. Right now, the dog is going through a necropsy. There's going to be toxicology reports coming back in the next several days, week. So we will hopefully find out more. And one last thing from the Washington Post here. This was just an extra bit of detail that I hadn't seen before. This is posted today, the 23rd. It says a couple, their baby and their dog, died on a California hiking trail, and officials don't know why. And it's just a little more detail saying that the father, Garish, was sitting. He was in a seated position. The baby and the dog were near him. And Chung, the woman's wife, was found further away. Not that far, but up the hill. To me, that reads, maybe she notices something is wrong with either the dog, the child, somebody. She feels something is wrong with herself and is trying to get to higher ground. But she doesn't make it. That's, to me, what it says, but I have no idea. Ben, you found something about actually identifying algae blooms. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is something that could be helpful, hopefully, to anybody who might find themselves in the same situation. What could surprise you is how quickly this stuff could become dangerous if it is an algae bloom and if you're around it at the wrong time. So the California Department of Public Health says that first you can notice something odd about the color. It may appear as though paint is floating on the water. Fellow color deficient people, this is why you use the buddy system, because you, like me, may not know that is brown or red color in the coloring to the water, but it could also be green or blue. And there are a couple of other things you can tell just by what Mac would call an ocular assessment.
There you go. Ocular assessments by yourself or a buddy. You know what? Let's use buddy system for everything. Every instance where you need to identify toxic algae blooms just to get a second opinion.
Yeah, I always like to have somebody else in the restroom, just in case, because there's toxic stuff that goes on there.
Well, I mean, we're also living in a dangerous world, fellas. I think the buddy system is probably just in general a good policy.
Oh, yeah. Especially, especially, unfortunately, in Atlanta, specifically
Agreed.
These days. Matt, there were a couple of other indicators, right, that people could use to tell whether there was potentially toxic algae in water.
Yes, you also want to look out for cloudy water. Yeah, cloudy water. Easy to tell, right?
I'm starting to think maybe we live in a dirty part of town.
Yeah.
Because
look at any river or lake in Georgia / near Atlanta, and that's what it looks like.
Dude, I recently saw some clear water before I came back, and I thought it was dirty because I realized it was so clear I could see the ground under it. And I thought, oh, that's what water is supposed to look like. Wow.
Yeah, that's when it's not just the almost colloid consistency. Right. That is really important. The other thing is smell. Just to point that out, if you're by a stream or something, or, in my backyard down where the little creek is and it smells awful, not great. It doesn't mean it's a toxic algae bloom, but
probably just standing water or something gross like that.
Yeah, but you just have to be careful because
definitely.
It really depends on elevation a lot of times, where you are, and if there's a pocket of, say, like in a toxic algae bloom, a pocket of carbon monoxide, or like in any of those other instances, that CO will just pool, basically, or it can pool. So you just have to be super careful of that stuff.
Doesn't this almost remind you of like the twist ending to like an Edgar Allan Poe story? Or something like you think they're looking for the murderer the whole time, and then at the end it turns out it was like a monkey with a razor or like a toxic algae bloom.
Yeah,
like a twist. Yeah, for a mystery novel, right?
Yeah, for sure. Also, just really quickly, because I had this question, and I just took it upon myself to look it up. Matt, you mentioned a necropsy on the dog, and maybe folks already know this, but I didn't. Necropsy and autopsy are essentially the same thing, but necropsy is parlance used to refer to digging up, exhuming, and examining an animal specifically.
Humans are so about themselves. We need our own word.
This is an autopsy. No, don't do an autopsy. Ooh.
An autopsy, is that when you take apart a car to figure out why it's not working?
I was thinking more of in the sense of an autobiography. So it's like an autopsy you do yourself.
That makes way more sense. Yes. I always thought that was one of the... I don't know how realistic it is. I know it has happened in the real world in the past, but I always thought that was one of the most badass things you would see in action movies, where someone does some sort of self-administered surgery.
Cuts into it and then takes the bullet out.
Bites down on a wooden spoon. You know? Exactly.
Sometimes while they're giving a speech to like the person they just met earlier at the mall or whatever, and they're like biting down, they're like, zombies, you can tell by the eclipse. I need you to run to Foot Locker. Get the tight socks.
Yeah, exactly. A good teeth gritted yowl is always a good move. And then stitching it up. Also, the part that always gives me I don't like needles, but the part that always makes me internally cringe is when they pour the alcohol on it. You know, and you know, like actually, this is not a spoiler at all. But if anyone's seen or plans to see the new Quiet Place movie, there is a gnarly injury that takes place in that and requires said self-surgery, well, not self-surgery, but real close. And the part where the liquid gets poured on, it is a just absolute gut-wrenching scream.
Do you guys think you could do it? This has nothing to do with an algae bloom and this tragic death, but I've always been curious. Do you guys think, Matt, Noel, Doc, that if you were required to, you could take one of those syringes and stab yourself with it? You know, where the ones where you have to like get into your chest.
All up in there.
Yeah. Do you think you could do it?
It's into the muscle, right? It's not like a vein. You got to literally just shove that thing into a muscle, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me check to make sure I know. Stab self in chest with needle.
Well, that's like the Pulp Fiction scenario where you're trying to restart somebody's heart. But there are situations where if you have a real bad injury, you might need to just inject it into the surrounding muscle tissue rather than like, I'm not quite sure. There are intramuscular injections, like say for diabetes and things like that.
Yes, yeah, like, you know, people administer insulin to themselves all the time. It's not a dramatic thing. Well, I just looked with not super heavy research, to be honest, and it appears that in the idea of injecting medication straight into the heart is a movie myth. According to Scott at Gizmodo, it is garbage.
He seems legit.
Yeah. Not having his first name on that really persuades me. He's got a lot of heft if you just have to know him by his first name. But well, I guess it's better that the four of us don't know whether we could do it, because it would be a bad idea.
Yes. Just leave you with this last thing. According to the Fresno Bee, no signs of trauma. According to CNN, no suicide note or indication that there is something intentional that occurred while they were out hiking that caused their deaths. It is a mystery. Hopefully we'll have answers soon. And dang, it's just a terrible tragedy that this occurred, and we can only hope it doesn't happen again. Ever, especially anytime soon. All right. Write to us if you hear anything, and we will tell you how to get in contact with us at the end of this episode. For now, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
And we have returned. But before we move on, Matt, I just, I wonder how many mysterious deaths like that occur each year, you know, because it again, to Noel's point, it does have this troubling, mysterious aspect to it. And I hope, you know, our thoughts are with the survivors. And I think we're all going to keep an eye on the updates from the autopsy here, because if we don't know what happened, then we have no way of preventing it from happening in the future.
Yeah.
So it was just something on my mind during our break. Our last story for today, folks, before we record, the three of us we usually get together and we think like, hey, how should we present this? And that's why you sometimes hear us say, okay, we're going to finish with a light one because we did some heavy stuff.
What did you call it, Matt? A good sandwich?
Serious sandwich.
Serious sandwich. Yes. That's
what we called it.
Like a muffaletta. That's a serious sandwich.
God, yeah. Muffalettas are so good. It's so weird that people are against them.
Sorry, I just don't like it, okay?
That's right. It was you. It was you, Fredo.
It was you, Fredo.
He doesn't like the olive salad, which I understand. I used to be really squiggy about olive-based products. In my older age, I have gotten much more cool with it, but I only like it in certain situations, and that is as a topping, and that muffaletta is what's up.
I feel kind of bad because, Matt, I think Noel and I both genuinely forgot. I was remembering a muffaletta conversation where I was surprised someone wasn't into it.
Just barely into it. I was like, it was you! But you know what? To each their own.
Exactly.
You guys don't realize. I try at least one per year on purpose because I want to like it.
And you went to the good place too, right? Like the place that's known and famous for muffalettas.
Central Grocery, right?
Yeah.
In New Orleans,
I don't feel bad, man. I think a lot of people have foods like that. Like, I'll be honest, this is kind of dumb to admit. I don't understand wine. I try it, you know, you're in situations where it's like you're supposed to drink some wine and I'll sit there with a glass in my hand, but I feel like a tool. I don't don't know the difference between, the really fancy stuff and the really cheap. And science proves there's not that much of a difference. Sorry, sommeliers.
I don't either. I drink white wine out of a box because I like the way it makes me feel, and I find it refreshing. I put ice cubes in it because I'm trash. I like red wine, though, for cooking. I like to put red wine in my ragu if I'm making like a nice
I'll cook with
spaghetti
wine.
bolognese or something. Red wine is a lovely thing.
Nice red wine in a beef bourguignon or whatever.
For sure.
Anyway, so how do we segue this, gents? We are talking about food, right?
This is an update, a bit of an update to something we've talked about a few times on this show.
Yes, yeah. In the past, we, like the rest of the denizens of the internet, made fun of McDonald's ice cream machines. This joke has become so ubiquitous that people have, it started to reach the level of hack comedy almost, like airline food. Oh, come on, right?
It's not so good, right? It's not so good. Yeah.
Some people walk different at the mall. What else?
Socks? Where do they go? Where do they go?
Exactly. And so the interesting thing, and I think this was something we touched on previously in Strange News, is that there is sand to all the complaining about this. The McDonald's ice cream machines, which can make both milkshakes and soft serve, are pretty much broken a ludicrous amount of times. So much so that in our previous segment, which I think you did, Noel, there was an app created that would tell you in pretty close to real time which machines were or were not working in McDonald's across the United States.
I think it was like crowdsourced, the way like the Waze app will allow you to say, is there a cop at this intersection? Is there a disabled vehicle? And then you can say yes or no. I think this one probably was a similar grid where if you're in the proximity of McDonald's, you're supposed to check in on them and then give a yay or a nay. And so it gave you all these little icons on these maps that would show you like which ones were out of order. And it was comical, Ben, the degree to which they were very much not in order.
And it turns out that itself is a genuine conspiracy, which I was not expecting. I don't know if anybody else was expecting this, but the argument and the mystery of McDonald's ice cream machines has escalated to a new level. People are filing restraining orders over this. Here's what happened. The truth of the matter is that the ice cream machines that are used in McDonald's, at least across the US, if not the world, are all the same type of machine. They're manufactured by the same company. There's something called a Taylor C602 digital ice cream machine. This thing, this Taylor contraption, is in these McDonald's because the franchisees are legally required to only have that machine. Furthermore, that machine, which is notoriously complicated and fragile and finicky, can only be serviced by a technician who is certified by Taylor.
I see where this is going.
And Taylor has a deal with management of McDonald's. In fact, there are allegations that part of this deal came about because members of McDonald's management, whether past or present, had a lot of stock in Taylor. So what we're really talking about, past the fun memes, which are great, and I'm sorry I called them hack comedy. That doesn't mean it's bad. I laugh at them too, right? Past the memes, though, this is a very serious conversation about something known as the right to repair, which is just going to get more and more controversial and more of a hot issue as the years go by. It's something that we've encountered before when we talk about planned obsolescence. It's something that we encounter before when we talk about, like, can't remember if it was us a few years ago, we were talking about trying to fix our iPhones on our own, or Androids. Have you guys ever attempted that?
There are little videos and walkthroughs on how to do it. You got to have tiny little tools, I think some proprietary tools, but it can be done. I mean, the folks that have those kiosks at the mall are basically just like self-starters that figured out how to do that and made a little business out of it, but they're not like certified Apple people.
Yeah, and we see that civilization is moving away from an ownership society in general to a service society, right? It's not impossible to say that in the future, you might have a car that is free but supported by ads. So you sit in a self-driving car and you just have to watch advertisements the entire time. I don't know how the business model works. They're going to have to figure out a few things.
I can't remember the name of the book. Gosh darn it. It was a really cool book by this futurist guy. And he was kind of predicting all of the like escalations of our like crowdsourced models of things. And one of them went so far as to be like, you don't even own furniture anymore. You kind of like pay a you subscribe to a service that gets you what furniture you need and will occasionally switch it out. Or maybe you don't own your clothes. You just like wear them around until you don't like them anymore. And then you get new ones, but you're not actually ever buying it. You're just paying a monthly thing. And that's the same with like video games. You don't have the actual disc anymore. In theory, if the whole system went belly up, you might not actually own that at all.
Or ebooks, right? When Amazon pulled, of all books, 1984, from the Kindle, that was not a good look on their
irony was not lost on the internet on that one.
So here's what happened, or here's what's been happening with the McDonald's ice cream machines. So they're a pain, right? You hear farmers complain about this in the US too. They might have a piece of farming equipment, a tractor or something, and they would totally be able to fix it. They would just need to have access to a way to understand the error codes the machine is giving them. But because of various proprietary measures, they cannot fix the thing that they purchased. What's happening with the McDonald's machines is that each one cost $18,000, and the restaurant owners don't get to know how they work, basically. So if anything goes wrong, and a lot of stuff goes wrong, they have to call in one of these people. They have to pay that person to come in, by the way. It's not free. And then the idea is that this somehow results in a kickback for some faction of the fast food empire at play. So there are these two folks, Melissa Nelson and Jeremy O'Sullivan, who started thinking of a way to get around this. And they began selling something they created, which they called Kytch, Kytch. So you can install it inside of this Taylor ice cream machine. You connect it to your Wi-Fi, and then it tells you what's going on. It tells you what the purposely obtuse codes on the machine mean. And then that lets you know how you can fix it. So the device lets you see what's going on in this thing that you again own, and then it'll suggest troubleshooting solutions and keep and keep track of what could be a larger problem.
You know what that reminds me of, Ben? Thinking back to your car stuff days, those little boxes that they can hook up to the electronics on a car that reads the codes, that like they're literal codes that you as a layman would never know what the hell they mean, but there's like a database they keep up with, and they know which manufacturer makes the car, and they can interpret it. And it could be something that you as a novice could probably figure out, but it just might be something you would never know unless you hooked up that. I think that's very much like what this is. It's like a little diagnostic reader kind of thing that reads these different like sensors or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. Yeah, that's in a vehicle, that's the OBD2 port, which you can plug in, and you can get code readers for it. And there are all kinds of neat little things you can do with it, up to and including hacking a car and taking control of it. If you're clever and also somehow sneaky enough to sit in the back seat of the car and not get caught.
Yeah. Or sometimes in the front, depending on where it is.
Yeah,
in my older vehicles, it was always right there in the front driver's seat where you could access it.
But that was the thing, though. There's no way to do it like remotely yet.
Officially.
Yeah.
Right? Matt, I saw your eyes light up, though, on this ice cream diagnostic situation.
Well, I love that we're talking about cars in this way, because I really think this whole thing has a lot to do with the car industry, especially when we've talked about it before when we were discussing new cars and buying cars. A company, let's say a Mazda dealer, cheers to you, Mazda, they will make a certain amount of money selling new vehicles. But the way they'll really make their money, because they make a certain amount on top of whatever the manufacturer's price is for that vehicle.
Yeah.
The way that dealership actually makes money is by having that person that just drove away with a new or used Mazda is going to agree as a part of that purchase to only bring their Mazda back to this service center.
Is that a thing, Matt?
Yes.
There actually are exclusivity agreements that get you some kind of special deal, or I would never agree to that.
I just
violates
did
the
one.
agreement, right?
Okay.
If
I
you
just
take it
did one
somewhere
of those.
You did.
I mean,
okay.
we have in and out of network healthcare in the U.S.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
not,
but it's only
dissimilar.
up to a certain period of time, though, right? Once your warranty runs out, then all bets are off, and you can do whatever you want. Is that the deal?
Yes, but you pay for a certain amount of time, like certain life of the vehicle, right?
Got it.
In many
Got it,
of
got
those
it.
deals. But what and I don't own a car dealership. What the dealership banks on is that you become so accustomed to taking your Mazda to their Mazda dealership that when it's time for some small change, you just go to that Mazda dealership because it's what you do now.
And then you hopefully buy your next car from that same Mazda dealership too. They've got you in the family. It's a easy kind of routine. I remember now, I bought a car at a dealership. It wasn't new, but it was so far away from me. I never would have taken it there in a million years. So I think I got a certified pre-owned car that was like, didn't have very many miles on, but I don't think that was part of the deal. But I could certainly see how that makes a lot of sense, because also in the mind of the consumer, they're the experts. They're the ones that made the car, so therefore, who better to work on it than the experts?
If I'm going to pay anybody $150 for an oil change, it's going to be the same people who ripped me off last time.
I just liked Rod. I just liked Rod so much. He gave me such a good deal, such a good rate.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a big thing, and I think you're absolutely right, Matt. First off, we're not accusing a dealership of any kind of untoward activity, because that is just familiarity, and I'm not saying that dealerships are ripping people off. In fact, there are tons of fantastic mechanics at dealerships, and they choose to work at those dealerships when they could have gone somewhere else.
Certainly limits your options to shop around, though, and to find the best price. We can maybe leave it at that. Yeah.
It is a bargain with definitive pros and cons, but also this is part of a new reality. Increasingly, automobiles are, especially the ones that are more on the bleeding edge of technology, like the newer electric vehicles, newer hybrid vehicles. Those aren't really things the average person can work on in their home garage. And this is also happening with phones. It's also happening with ice cream. If you've ever cracked open maybe a laptop to do some repairs, you know that a MacBook can be notoriously finicky. To wrap this up, and I do want to keep an eye on this, there is what Andy Greenberg over at Wired called a Cold War between Kitsch and McDonald. I know. No pun left behind. No wordplay left behind. And what's going on now is that, so Kitsch got in trouble with Taylor because they felt like they were taking this proprietary information, or they were breaking a profit system that kind of taxed the franchisees of these fast food places, arguably because, just like the dealership example Matt used, they're locked in. They can only go to this one source, even if they know how to repair a thing. So Taylor, the manufacturer of these machines, hit back with a really weird objection in court. They said, you can't, if you're a franchisee of McDonald's, you can't use these Kitsch devices because they can cause, quote, serious human injury. Death by ice cream machine or maiming by ice cream machine. Matt's nodding like, yeah, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen. Those things turn and churn for a reason. You got to churn.
That's true. That's true. And sometimes they could turn and churn on you. So earlier this summer, Kitsch won a legal battle against this company, Taylor, and a California judge issued a temporary restraining order against the company because apparently the bigger dog in the fight, Taylor, had acquired one of these Kitsch solution devices, and they were trying to reverse engineer it and build their own version of the same thing. So every time you get a McFlurry.
Sure.
Every time you get a McFlurry, or every time you get some delicious ice cream from McDonald's and the machine's working, you are in a way a bystander on a battlefield, right? That's taking place at 14,000 locations or something like that across the US, tens of thousands across the world. And that might be the thing, that might be the thing that makes you think, I should have gone to Blubba Dubba.
Blubba Dubba is the best. Ben, this rang a bell for me from a story that I thought I may have heard on public radio, and I just confirmed that I did in fact hear it. Apparently, 27 states and Congress are looking at something called right to repair legislation.
Yes.
This year. Also, this is something that's happening globally, and it is largely spurred by the isolation of COVID-19 lockdowns. People are really getting tired of having to send their crap back to the manufacturer, because then you're at the mercy of the manufacturer. You don't know how. They don't have any. There's no requirement that they guarantee how quickly you'll get your stuff back. You'd much more likely try to give it a go yourself. And with YouTube and manuals and all that, it's certainly something within the realm of possibility. But because of exactly what we're talking about, Ben, a lot of the types of tools and diagnostic things, they are kept on lock by the manufacturers. So they're essentially, they have you over a barrel. And this legislation that's being looked at would seek to prevent manufacturers from keeping those proprietary tools from the public.
And, there are arguments that companies will have against what we would call the right to repair. And they're, like anybody who's thought, boy, I'm sure getting ripped off because I don't have the ability or the wherewithal to fix the thing that I paid for. You can see how this could be an immensely frustrating situation. But we wanted to give you an inside look at ice cream conspiracy. You know what? I'd love to hear from someone who's had experience fighting for the right to repair something. I mentioned farmers earlier because there are horror stories about farmers trying to say, let me fix the thing I own. I know what's wrong with it. I know how to fix it. Your system won't let me. But then also let us know about mysterious deaths similar to the tragic events in California that we just explored today. And let us know your position. How much power should payment platforms have in general? We'd love to hear from you. We can't wait to do so. We try to make it easy to find us online.
That's right. You can find us in the usual internet places of note. We are Conspiracy Stuff on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We're Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram. You can also give us a telephone call.
That's right. Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. After you hear Ben, and you will hear Ben, please leave your message. Give yourself a cool nickname. You have 3 minutes. Say whatever you wish. Really, anything. Just let us know if we can use your voice and message on air. If you have too much to say and then you could fit in that 3 minutes, then hey, give us an email instead. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.